it dried all the quicker until afternoon. Then nothing would dry any more, everything freezing stiff. It had been an ideal costume to struggle through the slob ice. I really believe the conventional garments missionaries are supposed to affect would have been fatal. My occupation till what seemed like midnight was unraveling rope, and with this I padded out my knickers inside, and my shirt as well, though it was a clumsy job, for I could not see what I was doing. Now, getting my largest dog, Doc, as big as a wolf and weighing 92 pounds, I made him lie down so that I could cuddle round him. I then wrapped the 3 skins around me, arranging them so that I could lie on one edge while the other came just over my shoulders and head. My own breath collecting inside the newly flayed skins must have had a soporific effect, for I was soon fast asleep. One hand I had kept warm against the curled up dog, but the other, being gloveless, had frozen, and I suddenly awoke, shivering enough, I thought, to break my fragile pan. What I took at first to be the sun was just rising, but I soon found it was the moon, and then I knew it was about 12:30. The dog was having an excellent time. He hadn't been cuddled so warm all winter, and he resented my moving with low growls till he found it wasn't another dog. The wind was steadily driving me now toward the open sea, and I could expect, short of a miracle, nothing but death out there. Somehow one scarcely felt justified in praying for a miracle. But we have learned down here to pray for things we want, and anyhow, just at that moment the miracle occurred. The wind fell off suddenly, and came with a light air from the southward and then dropped stark calm. The ice was now "all abroad," which I was sorry for there was a big safe pan not 20 yards away from me. If I could have got on that I might have killed my other dogs when the time came, and with their coats I could hope to hold out for 2 or 3 days more, and with the food and drink their bodies would offer me, need not at least die of hunger or thirst. To tell the truth, they were so big and strong I was half afraid to tackle them with only a sheath knife on my small and unstable raft. But it was now freezing hard. I knew the calm water between us would form into cakes, and I had to recognize that the chance of getting near enough to escape onto it was gone. If, on the other hand, the whole bay froze solid again, I had yet another possible chance, for my pan would hold together longer, and I should be opposite another village called Goose Cove at daylight, and might possibly be seen from there. I knew that the komatiks there would be starting at daybreak over the hills for a parade of Orangemen about 20 miles away. Possibly, therefore, I might be seen as they climbed the hills. So I lay down and went to sleep again. It seems impossible to say how long one sleeps, but I woke with a sudden thought in my mind that I must have a flag. But again I had no pole and no flag. However, I set to work in the dark to disarticulate the legs of my dead dogs, which were now frozen stiff, and were all that offered a chance of carrying anything like a distress signal. Cold as it was, I determined to sacrifice my shirt for that purpose with the first streak of daylight. It took a long time in the dark to get the legs off, and when I had patiently marled them together with old harness rope and the remains of the skin traces, it was the heaviest and crookedest flagpole it has ever been my lot to see. I had had no food from 6 o'clock the morning before, when I had eaten porridge and bread and butter. I had, however, a rubber band, which I had been wearing instead of one of my garters, and I chewed that for 24 hours. It saved me from thirst and hunger, oddly enough. It was not possible to get a drink from my pan, for it was far too salty, but anyhow that thought did not distress me much, for as from time to time I heard the cracking and grinding of the newly formed slob, it seemed that my devoted boat must inevitably soon go to pieces. At last the sun rose, and the time came for the sacrifice of my shirt, so I stripped, and much to my surprise, found it not half so cold as I had anticipated. I now reformed my dogskins with the raw side out, so that they made a kind of coat quite rivaling Joseph's. But with the rising of the sun, the frost came out of the joints of my dog's legs, and the friction caused by waving it made my flagpole almost tie itself in knots. Still, I could raise it 3 or 4 feet above my head, which was very important. Now, however, I found that instead of being as far out at sea as I had reckoned, I had drifted back in a northwesterly direction, and was off some cliffs known as Ireland Head. Near these there was a little village looking seaward, whence I should certainly have been seen. But, as I had myself, earlier in the winter, been night-bound at this place, I had learnt there was not a single soul living there at all this winter. The people had all, as usual, migrated to the winter houses up the bay, where they get together for schooling and social purposes. I soon found it was impossible to keep waving so heavy a flag all the time, and yet I dared not sit down, for that might be the exact moment some one would be in a position to see me from the hills. The only thing in my mind was how long I could stand up, and how long go on waving that pole at the cliffs. Once or twice I thought I saw men against their snowy faces, which, I judged, were about 5½ miles from me, but they were only trees. Once also I thought I saw a boat approaching. A glittering object kept appearing and disappearing on the water, but it was only a small piece of ice sparkling in the sun as it rose on the surface. I think that the rocking of my cradle up and down on the waves had helped me to sleep, for I felt as well as ever I did in my life. And with the hope of a long sunny day I felt sure I was good to last another 24 hours, if my boat would hold out and not rot under the sun's rays. Each time I sat down to rest, my big dog Doc came and kissed my face, and then walked to the edge of the ice pan, returning again to where I was huddled up as if to say, "Why don't you come along? Surely it is time to start." The other dogs also were now moving about very restlessly, occasionally trying to satisfy their hunger by gnawing at the dead bodies of their brothers. I determined at midday to kill a big Eskimo dog and drink his blood, as I had read only a few days before in Farthest North of Dr. Nansen's doing, that is, if I survived the battle with him. I could not help feeling even then my ludicrous position, and I thought if ever I got ashore again, I should have to laugh at myself standing hour after hour waving my shirt at those lofty cliffs, which seemed to assume a kind of sardonic grin, so that I could almost imagine they were laughing at me. At times I could not help thinking of the good breakfast that my colleagues were enjoying at the back of those same cliffs, and of the snug fire in the comfortable room which we call our study. I can honestly say that from first to last not a single sensation of fear entered my mind, even when I was struggling in the slob ice. Somehow it did not seem unnatural. I had been through the ice half a dozen times before. For the most part I felt very sleepy, and the idea was then very strong in my mind that I should soon reach the solution of the mysteries that I had been preaching about for so many years. Only the previous night, Easter Sunday, at prayers in the cottage, we had been discussing the fact that the soul was entirely separate from the body, that Christ's idea of the body as a temple in which the soul dwells is so amply borne out by modern science. We had talked of thoughts from that admirable book, Brain and Personality, by Dr. Thompson of New York, and also of the same subject in the light of a recent operation performed at the Johns Hopkins Hospital by Dr. Harvey Cushing. The doctor had removed from the man's brain 2 large cystic tumors without giving the man an anesthetic, and the patient had kept up running conversation with him all the while the doctor's fingers were working in his brain. It had seemed such a striking proof that ourselves and our bodies are 2 absolutely different things. Our eternal life has always been with me a matter of faith. It seems to me one of those problems that must always be a mystery to knowledge. But my own faith in this matter had been so untroubled that it seemed now almost unnatural to be leaving through this portal of death from an ice pan. In many ways also I could see how a death of this kind might be of value to the particular work that I am engaged in. Except for my friends, I had nothing I could think of to regret whatever. Certainly I should like to have told them the story, but then one does not carry folios of paper and running shorts which have no pockets, and all my writing gear had gone by the board with the komatik. I could still see a testimonial to myself some distance away in my khaki overalls, which I had left on another pan in the struggle of the night before. They seemed a kind of company, and would possibly be picked up and suggest the true story. Running through my head all the time, quite unbidden, were the words of the old hymn. My God, my Father, while I stray Far from my home on life's dark way, oh, teach me from my heart to say, Thy will be done. It is a hymn we hardly ever sing out here, and it was an unconscious memory of my boyhood days. It was a perfect morning. A cobalt sky, an ultramarine sea, a golden sun, an almost wasteful extravagance of crimson over hills of purest snow, which caught a reflected glow from rock and crag. Between me and the hills lay miles of rough ice and long veins of thin black slob that had formed during the night.